a new laptop. Now it says here, open systems to privacy and security to grant access.
It's all right. Please take your time. I'll just, I'll
Let's
start the
download
webinar because we have
privacy
some
and
people in the waiting room.
security later.
Right. I think we are live
Oops.
streaming now. All right. So I think Akmal has left the room now. So hello and welcome everyone. We'll just have the speaker join in very soon. This webinar is called How to Build Local LLM Apps with Ollama and SingleStore First Max Security. Thanks for joining everyone. And I'm expecting Akmal to join within 30 seconds. So just hang on, bear with me. And I'm also sending him a Slack message. So yeah, just so yeah, you should know that you are currently in a listen only mode. And if there's anything that you require to ask, you can see a Zoom Q&A button which is present at the bottom of your console. I think Akmal has joined. Akmal, you're able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Yukti.
Awesome. So the
And
webinar has started, and just feel free to share your screen, and you can just go ahead.
yeah,
Meanwhile, that I do the introduction. Awesome.
now
So
you let me
to
know
this,
if,
right. Uh,
oh, sorry. So, now it says here, Yukti is currently host. Reclaiming host may disrupt breakouts
No,
rooms.
no, it's all right. It's all
Stay
right.
co-host.
So,
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So, yeah, to the audience, thanks everyone for joining. Once again, you are in a listen only mode. And if you have any questions, you might notice that you have the Q&A button, which is present at the bottom of your console. So, we don't take any questions while, like, if you raise your hand, just use that button and for any active discussion or like if there's anything that you would like for us to cover or if you have any feedback, suggestions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and you can let me know. And you can obviously, our aim is to answer 100% of the audience questions during the webinars. So if there's anything, just let us know no matter what it is. And yeah, I think the resources will be provided to you in the chat. And I think there's like, Akmal, you can just take it away now. And this is
Yeah.
all that I had to say.
No,
And
no. Thank you
please,
for.
please, please go ahead. And yeah, as you all might know that we have Akmal, who's a regular speaker at our webinars. He's a technical evangelist here at SingleStore and has been phenomenal uh, at hosting these webinars and actually bringing value to the society in terms, like the tech society in terms of spreading this free resource as a knowledge. So thanks, Akmal, for putting out the uh, content and for everything that basically that you're doing for us. So yeah, please take it away. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Yukti. And thank you all for joining. And apologies for the slight hiccup there. So let me just explain and give you a bit of context. So I just received a new Apple Mac and it's using the Apple Silicon. And so this is my first webinar since I received my new machine. And one of the things, as you know, is that Apple locks down applications. You have to enable this, enable that, grant permissions and access and so on. And so I kind of had to drop out because I had to just allow it access to my screen and microphone and so on. And that was the reason for that. Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you very much again for your time and for joining us. So this is actually, I think I haven't done one of these webinars for a little while. So Yukti's been very fortunate. She's been able to draw upon a awesome crowd of speakers that have done recent events. And so I'm very pleased to be back again doing this one. So thank you all. So as I always do, I check my time. So we are at 6:05 London time. And in terms of the presentation today, how to build local LLM apps with Ollama and SingleStore for max security. Okay. So if we just let me just make sure that I've got some of my. There we go. I'm glad to see that my these tools seem to be working okay. There we go. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat there already. All right. So as far as the agenda is concerned, well, I'll keep it fairly short in terms of the slide content. Okay, we'll just show you some of the demos. And as Yuxi mentioned, so there's some resources that you can access. There's a GitHub repo and a couple of articles as well. Okay, so there are notebooks that you can use. Now, if you're familiar with the single store environment, you'll know that we have this portal, which is the gives you the ability to provision resources on the web, and you don't need to install anything locally. But in this particular case, we are going to run something locally simply because that's the nature of the presentation. Okay, we're trying to host in an environment that is entirely under your control, and today under my control. Okay, but I mean, I'll discuss this a little bit more with you shortly. Okay, we'll see how this is set up. You can run all of this entirely within your own environment. I've got a kind of a hybrid environment, okay, and we'll talk more about that shortly. Okay, so we'll say a little bit about AI and ML with SingleStore, some of the ways that you can use these technologies, retrieval augmented generation for max security. Okay, so if you are interested in this and there are some issues around using external services, let me put it that way, then this may be for you. Okay. So as always, do a little bit of an introduction to the company. So we have been around for a little while. Okay, so 2011 is when it was founded. And as you can see, we're already up to 2024 on the right-hand side here. And there we go. 100 million plus in terms of annual recurring revenue. So that's kind of grown. And there was a kind of an inflection point here. You can see roughly somewhere between 2017, 2018, and the number of customers also well over 350 now. I think these numbers really need to be updated on the slides. And
I just wanted to interject. We have certain feedback from people that they're not able to see your screen.
oh,
So
that's
you can
interesting.
try to reshare your screen. If you're not able to share it, I can share the screen. So no worries. Just try to reshare it once.
Okay, that's
If you're not
interesting.
able to share it-
Can you see it, Yukti?
Actually, I can see it, but oh, okay. Apparently now people like you know what? Certain people are now saying that they can see the screen. So what you can do is maybe just try resharing it.
Okay,
Okay.
I tell you
We
what.
have in feedback that someone saying that there is a bug of Zoom. Like maybe there's an update that might be causing this.
Yeah,
So
could be, could be. All
just to
right.
make
So
sure,
tell you what. Let me stop sharing.
right.
Right. Let's stop sharing for a moment. So it's just you and me, and then let me just try resharing. All right. Now, as far as I can see, this looks okay to me. All right. And currently, you should be able to see my screen. Okay, which is this. Can you see the desktop there?
Yes, this is
All
visible.
right. All right. So let's have a look. Can you see the slide deck?
I can.
All right. Now I can bear with me.
So for
It's
whosoever who's not able to see the screen, maybe I think it's an issue either with the app or either with the browser. So yeah, someone has just said that if you're using the browser, you need to enable a pop-up feature. So if you
right.
can do that, that's great. If not, please try joining using the Zoom app. So, and if
Yeah.
you, yeah, if you miss out on something, feel free to drop in a question and we'll follow that up. So, yeah, Akmal, you can continue now. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, what I would highly recommend, if it's possible, and you have the permissions. And I know sometimes if you're using a company laptop, for example, there are restrictions in place in terms of what you can install in your the laptop that you have that is owned by your company, but that you are given permission to use. It's better to have the Zoom app rather than the browser. That's what I would recommend. I'm not a big fan of browser-based tools and technologies. I actually complain about and moan about that all the time because I find there are restrictions and limitations. Sometimes things just don't work, which is why the Zoom app is kind of preferable. If you're able to do that, that's great. And hopefully things will be visible for you. Okay, so let's move on. show you a little bit about the architecture. Okay, this is something we like to discuss quickly just to show you the high level view. Okay, so one of the things for SingleStore started off originally as a company called MemSQL. Okay, so both the product and the company used to be called MemSQL, and the focus was very much on in-memory online transaction processing, OLTP. And subsequently, the company added support for columnar data. Okay, so for analytics, so you can run these operations, sum, min, max, average, count at scale. And that is stored on disk, okay, for obvious reasons. As cheap as memory is today, it becomes a little bit impractical to store everything in memory. Sometimes it's much better, certainly for these analytic like operations, if you're dealing with certain types of data, say like Parquet, for example, it makes sense to be able to store these. Although you could cache the data as well. Okay, so product became known as SingleStore and added support for both OLTP and OLAP. Okay, so this is this kind of graphic here that you can see, universal storage. All right, so that's what this is all about: the ability to work with both types of data and be able to run queries on both types of data at scale. All right. And so we've got a variety of tools and technologies that you can use to get data in. And these are things that we've demonstrated in the past as well. So for streaming data, for example, you can use Kafka. All right. So we have some examples that we've shown in the past. There is actually a Kafka broker that we have, memcompute, which I've used in the past to demonstrate things like ad tech data or stock ticker. Great way to get data in. You can do transformations, okay, Apache Spark, or if you're using, other technologies, Hadoop HDFS, for example, S3 buckets, that's fine too. And the animation here, if you can see it, here is this concept of pipelines. Great way to ingest data in parallel at scale into SingleStore, right? So that's if you've got these external sources. And the other thing is that we have this change data capture CDC facility. So for example, you may have data in MongoDB, or you might have it in MySQL or MariaDB, for example. You can set up the CDC pipeline so it can connect and obviously the initial snapshot is taken, and then subsequently, if new data arrive into these systems, they get propagated into SingleStore as well. Now, why would you do this? Well, a couple of reasons. So first, you can keep your existing investment in the technology you use, but utilize SingleStore for analytics, for example, which is something it's really awesome at. And therefore, you don't lose out the investment that you've made in some existing technology. Now, at some point in time, you might decide, well, actually, you would like to move all of the data into SingleStore as well, and you could do that too. Okay, so this again provides you with a way to run things in parallel. Just assess the features and the capabilities of SingleStore, and if it meets your needs, then you may well decide to do that in the future. So we do work on all three major clouds: AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. Today, going to be running on AWS. You can run on-prem as well. And there's a hybrid model as well, which I will demonstrate a hybrid model in terms of the demo I'm going to show you, although it's not a hybrid of SingleStore per se. Okay, so SingleStore itself could be running the hybrid modes. Part of it could be running on-prem, part of it could be running in the cloud. Okay, that's possible too. Kind of interesting capability there. Data types, relational is where the technology has come from. But there is support for geospatial. There's an awesome new full text search capability and other types, JSON, for example, time series, and naturally vectors. Okay, you could even use it for key value here. There is a customer that I came across not so long ago that's actually doing that. Kind of interesting use case. Real-time decisions, AI apps, dynamic experiences, dashboards, ad hoc queries, machine learning. So this kind of gives you a nice overview, high-level picture of some of the integrations, some of the feature capabilities. And in case you're kind of wondering, well, the benefit of this is from a developer perspective, Typically, you have this kind of scenario where maybe you start off with a database and you've got some batch ingest, for example. You're running some applications. Maybe you need to there's some operational capability you need to add, and then perhaps JSON support, and you're integrating with some third-party data sources as well. Maybe you need some caching. Okay, so one of the things that I came across in the past is that Redis, for example, is a very popular caching technology. It kind of sits in front of MySQL often. You use that, and maybe you want some search. Elastic, for example. How about streaming data? Working with IoT, clickstream data, maybe some integration with Kafka, or perhaps you want to do some analytics as well. Using something like Snowflake. That's an awfully complex architecture. It starts off simple, but very challenging in terms of skill set. Very difficult to find someone that can probably do all of those, all right? So from a developer's perspective, lots and lots of technologies that you have to learn and you have to integrate. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just simplify that process? Okay, so not forgetting Spark there as well. And so what SingleStore can do is simplify this database sprawl for you. So, yep, can still do the batch ingest and it can handle the operational requirements, very happily integrate with third-party systems. We can plug in Kafka, use the pipelines to ingest transaction and analytics. We talked about the unified storage, single table type that can deal with both types of use cases, plus all the multi-model capabilities there in the top right that you can see, the relational, geospatial, and so on, all of that. So the benefit for you as a business user is now you have a single product, lower total cost of ownership, reduces your bills. The good thing from a technical perspective, as far as a developer is concerned, you don't have to learn half a dozen or more technologies. Okay, one product is sufficient that can do all of these things. And again, we have examples of this that we've discussed in the past. And again, we can provide these to you as well if this is something that you're interested in and exploring further. Now, AI and machine learning, obviously very popular topic these days. The application of machine learning has grown over time because the ability to access cheap computing power, lots of memory and processors and so on, this has really helped significantly. I mean, many of the ideas, as you know, based on statistics, and that's been around for a very long time. So integrating with these technologies, it's kind of rather important today. I mean, if you want to work at scale and you want to be able to analyze data, build these models, and again, we've demonstrated many examples of this in the past, and I blogged about this as well. So these are just a small sample of some of the tools and technologies we integrate really well with. So, for example, things like Apache Spark. I've got a whole series of articles that I wrote earlier this year, showing how we can do that in the SingleStore portal. We have this Python client. It was machine learning libraries, Jupyter-like environment in the portal. Normally, we use that for our demos. Today, I won't be using that, but I'm going to use a local install of Jupyter. Okay, you'll see why very shortly. We do work with vectors. Okay, so the two vector functions that are supported out of the box, Euclidean distance and dot product. Cosine similarity, very easy to code up using SQL. And if there's anything else that you have, maybe something that you want to use, you can code that up using WebAssembly. Okay, this is a very useful feature. And in case you're interested, just very recently, within the last couple of weeks, I wrote an article talking about sentiment analysis of Stack Overflow comments, and that uses WebAssembly, WASM. Okay, so this is actually hosted on Google Cloud, and it's possible to utilize that, get your data in, and then use this piece of code that uses something called Veda, okay, which is originally, I think, written in Rust, valence aware dictionary and sentiment reasoner. So the product treats that as a UDF, as a function, and it just works over the data. Very interesting. And so, literally you can extend the capability of the engine ad infinitum. And it runs in its own space as well. So if there's a bug in your code, it doesn't crash the entire database system. Okay. And of course, working with these um, LLM providers, ChatGPT and the likes, sort of OpenAI and so on. Okay. Today we won't be using that. All right. So RAG for max security. All right, now let's think about a scenario where we would like to utilize something like, say, retrieval augmented generation. Um, Very straightforward. You've probably seen diagrams of this, since the release of ChatGPT. So the idea is that we have some end user, okay, typically want to ask some kind of question. There is a Gen AI app, and we are utilizing this large language model. We're creating these embeddings, storing it in a database system. Often you might use a vector database system, but SingleStore can very happily store that type of data. And the interesting thing is that SingleStore has actually had vector support for quite some time, right? So it's not something we just added in the recent past because it's popular, but this was actually requested some years ago. And I think originally it was requested by a financial customer that wanted to do some particular types of processing. And so Euclidean distance dot product have actually been in the product for a while. It's mature, battle tested, and used in production environments. And then utilizing the capability of the LLM, we can do some search and retrieve, and you'll see a little bit of that in a few moments' time. Okay, so this is the typical flow. Now, the thing is, in an environment where you're relying upon external services, for example, and I'm just picking this not for no particular reason, okay? It's just OpenAI, for example, if you're utilizing their services, and let's say you're not doing it through Microsoft's offering or collaboration with the OpenAI, then you face a slight challenge in that you are sending data to an external environment outside of your control. There are some ways to control this. So, for example, private link, creating these kind of private subnets, VPCs, some ways that you could have a little bit better control in terms of where things run and utilizing these third-party services as well. That could work quite well. And then certainly we have some customers doing that. And so here you can see a simplified diagram where we want to be able to run some analytics, and we've got some data. We can ingest that using pipelines. Okay, we can vectorize, and you could utilize the capabilities of, say, a commercial LLM or something that's open source through maybe the likes of Hugging Face, for example. Today, I'm going to be using LangChain as well. Okay, so you'll see that momentarily. All right, so this is one mechanism that you could do. And I think in some situations, for example, in the financial sector, there are some issues that you have to consider. Maybe some legal requirements as well that force you to think very carefully about these kind of architectures and where your data is going. And so having this better control, being able to run this in a private environment gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility, as well as a lot more control in terms of, your data is not leaking out and moving outside of your environment beyond, and sending to some kind of third party for processing. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned in the past is that we have within the SingleStore environment this compute service. And one of the things that we would like to do and have been working on for some time, and hopefully it will be released in the near future, is the ability to have these models and Gen AI models actually hosted within our environment. There is a kind of proof of concept that we have available, and I've actually seen it working. So, for example, Ollama is run within our environment, and certain models are available, and you can utilize those in the cloud. Okay, so that's something that could work. But again, I realize that for some organizations, okay, that might not be a feasible solution simply because, again, it is being hosted externally from your environment, but that is something that could be useful in certain circumstances. Okay. I did mention the hybrid cloud, and so here is a little bit of a graphic showing you how this might work. So, scenario, retail store point of sale data being analyzed by BI users, for example. Okay. And you've got sort of two parts to this. So you've got the um, self-managed part, okay, which is running within your environment here. Okay, and then you've got some aspect of it that's actually running in Helios, which is the cloud. Okay, so that's the cloud offering that we have. And then utilizing a couple of technologies here to connect these together. Okay, Kafka, Debezium, for example. And again, you can, there's plenty of documentation on integrations and how you could utilize these. So the setup there is the hybrid deployment, single store self-managed plus Helios Cloud on free shared tier, for example. Aggregator, single store Helios Cloud as hub, CDC out, Debezium and Kafka. Okay, so that could work. And so essentially, I mean, you've got a one-way, it's moving from left to right in terms of the data. Okay, but there's nothing to stop you making that bidirectional. But in this particular case, essentially, you've got the bulk of the data being stored in the cloud, although there is some local processing being done here as well. Okay, so that could be useful for certain scenarios. Okay, now, as far as LLMs and SingleStore are concerned, well, if we take a look at where SingleStore can run, it can run locally, it can run within your environment. You could run it remotely in the cloud. Great. Okay, nothing to install, or the hybrid approach that we just saw in the last slide. That will work well. And similarly for large language models, you could run them locally, which we're going to do today with Ollama. You could utilize a third-party service. And again, I'm just picking one at random here. Okay, OpenAI, for example. Okay, you're sending, and I use that quite frequently as well myself for certain projects and things. So again, relying upon uh, some hosted provider external to your environment, not always possible for some organizations. Again, I realize that, but thinking about some of the things that we talked about, the private link, private subnet, VPCs, these kind of things could be solutions that could help in these situations. So essentially here, look, you can see you've got a lot of flexibility. Any one of those combinations is possible, as you can see, and that gives you a lot of freedom and choice. Okay, so let's show you a little bit of code now. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to use is Ollama. Why? Because it's fairly widely known. Okay, it allows you to install locally, gives you this local LLM deployment. Okay, so we can run LLMs like Llama 3, for example, on Mac, Linux, Windows. Wide model support, various models that we can utilize. Okay, and that's useful. Again, gives you choice and flexibility to pick the most appropriate for your problem, and customization and integration. So this works with frameworks like LangChain, Llama Index, and so on, okay, for enhanced functionality. And again, today we'll see it working with the LangChain. Actually, I'll show you two. So I'll show you the LangChain example, which is better, okay, because essentially the framework is doing all the heavy lifting, the plumbing, and all of that for you. And then there is another notebook which I won't run, okay, but I'll show you, which is essentially if you remove LangChain from the equation, what would it look like? Well, you end up having to do a lot of the coding yourself, and that can cause significant maintenance and could be a headache longer terms in terms of managing the code. And the steps to set this up locally, very straightforward, super simple. Again, there's an article, okay, so as well as notebook, and Yukti will share those in the chat so you can take a look at those. I strongly recommend though that you utilize either a virtual machine, okay, or you create a virtual environment in order to do this. Saves a lot of time. Um, The only thing that you're going to need for this particular to replicate this particular example, and again, it's your choice. Okay, so you can actually install SingleStore locally if you wish to do so. So once you create an account on the portal, portal.singlestore.com, there is a section which gives you access to a license, and you can install a 4 node version free of charge. Okay, so that's one way that you could do it. In my case, I don't have sufficient resources to be able to do that. I could potentially install a 2 node version. Okay, that would work. But again, because I've got other things running in this environment, my Mac is not going to be the ideal way to run this. But essentially, we just need the username and password from our cloud environment, okay, because it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid setup. I do need to create the database, okay, or in the free shared tier, a database is already created for you, in which case you don't need to do this step, okay? So that would be, let me have a look. Okay, this would be unnecessary, okay? You'd just essentially take the name of the database that is already available for you in the free shared tier and just plug that in. And then locally in this Linux box that I have, this virtual machine, I mean, I just installed Jupyter Notebook, and Ollama is dead simple. So this is the specific command if you want to run it in Linux. Okay, there are equivalent commands if you wish to install it on a Mac, if you wish to do so on a Windows environment as well. So it will download that. There is a server that runs as well. And then all I need to do is that because I've got my SingleStore instance running in the cloud, I need to be able to tell my notebook, my Jupyter environment that I've got running locally, where to find it, how to connect to it. And so it's just an export here, plugging in the details. And again, all of this is documented in the short article that accompanies the notebook. Okay, so just need the password, the host, and again, just plug in the appropriate database name, whether you choose to create that yourself or if you use the free shared tier, you wouldn't use this. Okay, you just plug in the name that you're already assigned, and that's it. Just launch the Jupyter Notebook. It's as simple as that. So you can see what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. Very straightforward. Nothing particularly hard there. You may have, some of these steps already done, and literally that will get you up and running. Okay, so at this point in time, let me stop this now for a moment. Okay, and then just switch to this. Okay, this is the virtual machine, and just make this a bit bigger here. Okay, so there we go. And just hopefully you can see this. And again, please let Yukti know if you can't, so that at least, oh, that's not a good, don't send. There you go. Sorry about that. It's not see an error like that often in Linux, but something obviously upset it. Okay. So this is, let's have a look. It's Ubuntu. It's a 64-bit ARM. Okay. And this is version 24.10 that I'm currently running. And that sequence of 7 steps that I showed you in the previous slide, well, I went through exactly the same myself. And this is just Jupyter running now. So if we take a look here, all right, let's just scroll up a little bit. There we are. So here in this environment, this is running locally to me. I have Ollama installed locally as well. And what I'm doing here is simply using LangChain. Okay, so hence the use of these imports here. All right, so I'm going to use something called mini LM here in order to create the vector embeddings. That's a very small 45 megabyte download roughly. Okay. And the thing that takes a bit of time to download, but remember, this is a one-off operation. So as long as you don't uninstall, or if you're using a virtual machine, don't go to a previous snapshot and kind of remove everything, is actually getting the main LLM. In this case, I'm using Llama 2 here. So this takes a bit of time to download. It is a 3, well, used to be a 3.8 gigabyte download. So it does take a couple of minutes. But the thing is, once you've downloaded it, Ollama stores this locally. And so you don't need to download it again. And you can use this directly from other notebooks as well, straight away. All right. And here, just a quick, simple example. We just create some sample documents here. Okay, just for testing. And then all I'm simply doing is saying, okay, take those, create some vector embeddings here. Okay, and then we determine how many dimensions these are. I think it's about 384 or something. It's mini LM creates. If you're using OpenAI, for example, it would be 1536 or something like that. And then here we just utilize LangChain, and this is the kind of the magic, if you like. So it's storing the original documents, storing the embeddings. Okay, so let me just highlight those for you. Okay, so we're storing the documents, we're storing the embeddings. There's the table name, which if it doesn't exist, it'll be created. What's the distance strategy? So by default, it will use dot products, but I've decided here I'd like Euclidean distance. Okay. Use vector index. So in this particular case, it will create the vector index in the database for us as well. Okay, that's ANN. And the previously determined dimensions, because SingleStore needs to know how large the vectors are in order to create the, in order to ensure that the vector type has the correct number of dimensions. Okay, so this does all of the hard work behind the scenes for you. Okay, you just give it some parameters, it will go away, create the table for you, store the data, store the embeddings, and create the index for you as well. Okay, by the way, there's more that you can do here as well. So for example, if you want to use full text as part of this as well, there's another option that will allow you to do that. Very straightforward. Okay, the documentation on the website uh, for LangChain will give you all of those details. Okay, so just search for SingleStore there, and you will find that information. And then very, very straightforward here. So remember, this is being stored in the cloud now. So there was an environment variable, if you remember from the slides that I showed you, that points to my instance. Well, you'll see there's no reference to that here. It's because it picks it up automatically from the environment, okay? And that's how the magic works. And then once that's done, we can then ask things like this, questions of the data. So this just says what animals are llamas related to. So it does a similarity search, returns the result, and we get the best match here, okay, which is shown just there. Okay, and then once that's done, and remember again, this is all running locally as far as the mini LM and the LLM itself, which is Llama 2 in this particular instance, but the data are being stored through a secure connection in the cloud. Equally, I could have that SingleStore instance running locally, but as I mentioned earlier, I simply don't have the resources to be able to do that within this particular environment that I'm currently running in a meaningful way, okay? And then finally, we make use of the LLM here as well, and then ask it, well, take that and then do a bit more, give us some more data about this. So it gives you a whole load of additional information about llamas down below here. Okay, this is the response. Now, as I mentioned, there's two very slow parts to this. Okay, again, my environment is not ideally suited for this. Typically, if you want to use this on a sort of production sort of scale, you would allocate significantly better resources than I've got for my particular laptop. So the two things, as I mentioned before, that will run quite slowly if you do this is firstly this download here, which is in this case Llama 2. And then secondly, when you're querying the data, let's just scroll down a bit here, asking this question, this takes a little bit of time as well in terms of evaluation as well before you get this answer back. Okay. Okay, so that is very, very straightforward. As you can see, from a developer's perspective, it's a breeze. Super simple to code. The framework does all the heavy lifting for you. I've got Ollama serving this mini LM and Llama 2 locally within this environment. And again, no cost, well, one-time cost, okay, in the sense that, yes, I do need to download them and have them installed locally, but once that's done, I don't need to keep re-downloading this again. And let me just quickly show you the equivalent if we didn't use LangChain. So again, this notebook is available for you to have a look at. So there you can see a bit of a sad face there in terms of the extra work that you as a developer would have to do. So again, we start off with the same process. And because both of these have been downloaded, the response here is just super fast. It doesn't have to go through the process of grabbing these any. Again, they are already available. Okay, so but it just says the status success, just tells me that they are already there. So no delay there. Same set of documents there. You can see exactly identical. Here we had to do a little bit more work in terms of generating the embeddings here, okay, because it needs to be in the correct format. By default, SingleStore expects them to be 32-bit floating point numbers. So we make sure they meet that requirement. And then again, we pick up from the environment this export variable that again I referenced in the slides. We need to do a little bit additional sort of formatting here so they can pick this up. We've got to go through the process of creating the table as well. So we need to issue the query to do that. And then here you can see there is this vector type, which again, we've determined the number of dimensions that we need above, and we simply substitute that here to ensure that the table can accommodate those embeddings correctly. Then we connect to the database, and then we have to go through the process of using this pandas df to SQL to store the data in SingleStore. We've got to add our vector index as well, okay, here. And then finally, we get to the point just down below where we can ask that exact same question that we did previously. And again, you can see that the level of code is quite significantly more than what we saw previously. So again, we've got to go through this process of ensuring that everything is correct, formatting is correct, and so on. And again, we get like the same answer here. And for the LLM itself, that's straightforward. The code here is the same. Let's see. And you can see the response here. Okay. So key point here is that Ollama, super simple to use, great for local development. Do ensure that you've got adequate resources to run it. And by that, let me sort of give you a little bit in terms of my experience. So my virtual machine, I mean, my Mac has got 16 gigabytes. I originally gave 8 gigabytes to the virtual machine. And what I found is that 8 gigabytes was insufficient for Llama 2 to work. I mean, it would come back with an error message to say that it doesn't have enough resources. So I bumped up the virtual machine to 10 gigabytes, gave it a bit more. And in that case, it was able to run successfully and give me back these responses in both cases that you've seen there and you saw in the other example. Okay. SingleStore is running securely in the cloud, and we are connected to it. Let's just get back here. There we go. And let's just shut this down. Okay. Take this back here. Okay. So let me just kind of summarize what we've seen. Right. So benefits of this, well, why would you want to use it? Well, hopefully I've convinced you that what this will do, it will give you greater control and privacy. None of this is being sent to any kind of third party in terms of generating the embeddings or using the large language model. It's mine. It's under my control, runs in my environment. This reduces risk of unauthorized access or data breaches. Okay, that's better. Cost effective. Avoid subscription fees or usage-based billing. The quality of these open source LLMs, which the likes of Meta and others are releasing, is just getting phenomenal. I mean, you know, the um, they are as good, if not better, than the commercial offerings. Okay, you will find lots of possibilities. There's many different vendors are offering these, and you've got the likes of Hugging Face as well, which are serving these as well. Faster inference times and reduced latency eliminates the need to communicate with remote servers, benefiting real-time applications. Okay, that could help. Bear in mind what I did say though, that because this is a laptop, it's not ideally suited to acting as a kind of a server for large language models. There is a delay in terms of the performance simply because it needs a certain level of memory and processing power. GPUs would help, I'm sure, but I don't have those within this particular environment, or not sufficient to be able to give me the really fast inference times that I would perhaps want. That's something to think about. Customization and fine-tuning. Users can modify the model architecture, optimize performance, integrate with existing infrastructure to suit specific use cases. Again, gives you a lot more flexibility and choice, okay? So using this approach, if you wanted to host everything within your own environment, you could do that. So you can run Ollama locally, you can download everything locally, okay? Whether that's using something like Mini-LM, for example, for the embeddings, or Llama 2 as the LLM, that's fine. It's under your control. You can even run SingleStore locally as well. In this particular case, I'm running it in the cloud and connecting securely to it. But the kind of, if you like, the legwork as far as the embeddings and LLM, it's being done locally before the data are being sent to the database system through a secure connection. Okay, one of my favorite quotes there. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Okay, Arthur C. Clarke. So, lots of possibilities there. Super easy to use. You saw me using Jupyter notebooks there. Equally, if you don't want to use that, you can, integrate Ollama using just standard Python programs. You can build those, modularize it, have specific code to run specific functions or queries as you wish to do so. It's just that one of the nice benefits of doing it in a notebook environment is that it tends to be a little bit more forgiving. Okay, you can experiment. If there are problems, you can go back, fix the code, rerun the code very simply. And as you can see, it supports that really well. Okay, so thank you for that. Let's take a look at the time. So we do have time for some questions. So at this point in time, let me stop there. Okay, and hand back to Yukti. And Yukti, if you would like to just take some of the questions that maybe you've received, do my
We
best to
actually
answer
have a
those.
lot of questions for you. So,
Hopefully, you've shared the links as well to the GitHub repo. Okay, so the GitHub
uh,
repo contains both of the notebooks that you saw there today, as well as links to the two articles that will discuss each of those two notebooks as well. Okay, so they just walk through the process. Super simple in terms of the setup and the environment. And then again, we just walk through the little bits of code that you saw there as well and describe what we're actually doing. Great. So over to you, Yukti.
all right. So now to the audience, we are now open for questions, and we are starting with the Q&A session. So just to start, okay, so we have one very common question, that will the session be recorded? Yes, the session will be recorded. You can find it at our events page. And if there's anything, like, you can also email us at team@singlestore.com, and we'll take care of the request. So, Akmal, there's a question for you from Kiran. They say that, how does SingleStore help in prompt caching? Can you explain at a high level?
Prompt caching. Oh, that's a good question. I think from that perspective, I mean, we are a database system. So you can, there are, because of the way that SingleStore is architected, it can certainly cache things in memory, okay? Frequent operations, but those would be sort of database operations. If you are running queries very frequently against the database system, I mean, essentially there is this sort of plan cache, okay? There is a the ability that the system kind of recognizes that you are running things frequently. It will tend to keep those queries and the how to evaluate them in memory until and I think it's probably a FIFO, first in, first out kind of thing. So at some point in time, the memory, some other query might be run more frequently. Those things would be eliminated from the plain cache. So there is some caching that the product does. That would be, though, from specifically from a query perspective. Okay, the prompts themselves, you would typically ask these as queries to the database system using, say, the likes of LangChain. That's a great question. So in beyond that, I'm not sure what more the product would provide. Let me look into that. Okay, that's a very thoughtful and interesting question. Actually, I haven't thought about that. So I'll give that some thought. Okay, and we'll look into that. Thank you for that.
I think I was on mute. So yeah, moving
That's
on
okay.
to the next question, we have one very interesting question from Shaji Nathan. They say that how can I add graph database like capabilities on top of SingleStore? I want to use SingleStore for multiple use cases. Data network analysis is one of them. I
Yeah.
want to use graph DB capabilities to store network data, hence the request.
Right. Again, great question. So you'll notice that for the multi-model capabilities that I listed a little bit earlier, there is one thing that is kind of missing. Okay, let me just go back here. All right, and let's take a look at this. So let's just quickly do this. All right. So what is the one thing that is kind of missing from here currently? Okay, and that's graph support. So SingleStore provides this thing called common table expression, okay, CTE, recursive CTE. And that's a great way to be able to do graph-like operations on the product. And in case you're interested, if you have a look at my uh, medium.com, just search for my name. One of the articles that I wrote a little while back is demonstrating how we could take some data. And I'm a big fan of the London Underground, okay, in terms of data set. So we've got stations and we've got lines. So the lines segments kind of connect stations together. So in that case, we can perform queries over a network-like structure and ask, for example, if we're interested in finding what is the shortest route between one location and another. Something like this will work very efficiently and can do these kind of graph-like operations across it. Now, will SingleStore actually support a proper, in quotes, graph database? I'm not sure at the moment. It has certain engineering challenges. We have demonstrated integration with, say, GraphQL and other technologies as well. Sometimes it's very easy to be able to plug these in and to utilize those capabilities. But if you think about it, there are packages out there, and here in particularly, I'm thinking of something called Networks, which is a great Python library that allows you to model connections. So, for example, things like rail networks, road networks, flight paths, airports, these kind of things. You can model these as graph structures and in terms of nodes and connections, and that can work really well. And again, I've demonstrated how easy it is to use that with SingleStore. So that would be a possibility. Okay, so we've got a couple of options there, as you can see. So use the recursive CTE, for example. That will work well for certain problems. Equally, you can plug in some of these external sort of libraries as well. Networks is a good example. Awesome. I've used it in the past as well for sort of geospatial. And if you look at some of the articles that I've written over the past couple of years, you'll see I tend to use the London Underground as a great example because it demonstrates things like a graph-like, network-like structure. And then, for example, if you want to find things like the shortest path between one location and another, it can do that for you and traverse that structure in order to retrieve the data for you. So that might work for you as well.
All right, so we can take one more questions. So I think the question again from Shaji is that they are following up and saying that, do you have any examples on GitHub? If yes, that would be great.
Right. So let me just have a look here. All right. So bear with me one sec. Um, it's it's have a look. All right. So it's github.com, and there we go. Let me try and see if I can get that for you. Is it going to work or not? And there we are. Let's try this. Doesn't like it. No, doesn't. That's annoying. Just let me just enter that and then just see what we can. There we go. Finally. All right. So github.com/, very fat boy. Okay. It's easy to remember. All right. So this is my GitHub repo. And you'll see that the recursive, if you just do a search here, look in the repos, okay, CTE. Oh, no, it's just, let's have a look. No, it doesn't seem to like that. It's here somewhere. Anyway, geospatial. There we go. So the geospatial example is a great one that uses networks. Okay, so again, there's reference to an article. Okay, quite a long one actually. Okay, and this is on Medium. All right, let me just click that. So you can use in SingleStore as a geospatial data. So what we do here is we work with some geospatial operations. Okay, um, points, polygons, etc. And we load in data for the London Underground, and we use a Streamlit app that actually allows us to query and look for the shortest path. So we use networks as well. So this, if you wish, is a great place to start. Okay, so again, very easy to remember the link. So there we go. Surprise, surprise, medium.com/at very fat boy. Okay, so there we go. And you will see there's 100 and I think over 100 and is it 106 articles. 105 of them are on SingleStore. So there's a lot of stuff here. And if you look back in and search this, you'll find pretty much everything that's covered. Vectors. And one of the examples here, I'll try my very best to find this just before we finish off. Okay. I think we have to, let me, uh, there we go. I knew it was there somewhere. Using SingleStore, recursive CTE with London Underground data. Okay. So we've got this challenge here of, yeah, the Northern Line. If you're familiar with London, it's got two kind of branches. So we can utilize recursive CTEs to be able to traverse this and then, give us essentially find the shortest distance here between a particular station. Euston, for example, serves both branches. And so we're kind of interested to know which is the quickest way to get there. So there you can see in this particular case, 17.39 miles versus 20 miles going the other direction. Okay, so you can do these kind of graph-like operations here. And the geospatial one is another great example. Okay, so this is just using Folium here. Spark, Kafka, AdTech, MarTech, lots of stuff covered. LangChain, Iceberg. So this is there's plenty of, and just to kind of quickly finish off, because I realize we're out of time. I just went through the process of reviewing all of these articles that I've written over the past couple of years, in some cases where they needed updating, for example, because certain packages had changed, or maybe some syntax or something else that needed updating. In some cases where we had integrations with third parties. So MindsDB, for example, they stopped offering that as a cloud service. I had to rewrite the article slightly to utilize that. I've gone through the process of cleaning up all the content. Everything should work, and there will always be a link to the GitHub repo where the code is fairly substantial as well. So that either it will be SQL code, or it will be Python code, or it will be notebooks. And you can find those in the GitHub repo. Excuse me, in the GitHub repo. Okay, Yukti, I think we are at the top of the hour, and I think for you it's past midnight. I think so.
All
You need to
right.
get some sleep.
So yeah, very sorry that we can't take up all the questions, but definitely, if you have anything,
Yeah.
email us at team@singlestore.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Yukti Dwivedi. You can just type it in and like just add SingleStore, or you can reach out to Akmal as well. If there's anything, really look forward to your feedback. And thanks for attending this session. And thanks, Akmal, for presenting this session. And we are actually coming up with a very I'm putting up a very detailed program for December, and we are really looking forward to repeat a lot of popular topics in addition to new topics. So, well, stay tuned for that. I'll let
Yeah.
you know.
Will you, can we give a hint to the audience? Will we be doing the ChatGPT super app one?
Yeah, and
Competitive
we are
against a NoSQL database and a pure vector database. Are we going to do that one?
absolutely. If you are up for it,
Okay,
just
great.
slack me the topics, and like I'll try to prepare
Yeah, yeah.
the abstracts for those. And yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that would be great because what it
I'm
shows
planning to.
you. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say to the audience that, sometimes you've seen me talk about the multimodal capabilities today. So, for example, I said that we've got JSON support, we have vector support, and so on. And so you may have an environment, for example, where you are using a NoSQL database for uh, JSON documents, for example, or you may have, say, a pure vector database for vectors. And although many of the products today seem to be adding more and more capabilities, remember, we talked about this earlier, SingleStore has had these for quite some time. So they are mature, they are battle tested. Okay, customers use them in production systems. So one of the webinars that I suggested to Yukti that we do is to demonstrate how, if you are using a NoSQL database and a vector database, how you could move the data from that into SingleStore and consolidate. Rather than having two different products, you have a single product that can do both of those things. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now and stand down
All
and
right.
hand it to you. So,
So, yeah, one more topic would be the Apache Spark topic that you did. So, yeah, stuff like Claude. We are planning to make around some content around that. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. And thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of the day. If there's anything that you would like for us to, follow up on, just reach out to us.
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.